So this morning's reading comes from the monologue, I would say, from the recent Barbie movie, which in part is some of what we're referencing today as a primary text. I know. There are mixed feelings about this. And I had my own. But thank you for receiving this. So here's a speech that I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit, but I hope it resonates with some folks. And for those who it doesn't resonate quite as much with, may you invite it in as best as you can. And maybe notice where in your body, as I read this, is there like a tensing up? Or is there maybe a dis-ease? Or do you just don't feel anything at all? It is literally impossible to be a woman. You are so beautiful and so smart, and it kills me that you don't think you're good enough. Like, we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin, and you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but you also have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane. But if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be part of the sisterhood. But always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget, the system is rigged. So find a way to acknowledge that, but also be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard. It's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us. And if all of that is also true for a doll just representing women, then I don't even know. This monologue. I probably need one, that's what's happening. Delivered by America Ferrera in Greta Gerwig's Barbie, the movie, amplifies and underscores what for some means to be a woman. It's placed at a critical moment in the film. Stereotypical blonde Barbie has traveled from Barbie land to the real world and then back to discover that Ken, faithful Ken, who came with her to the real world, has brought back the patriarchy. And it's up to her and a small group of people to fix it, along with Gloria, America Ferrera's character, and her daughter, who does not like Barbie. Responding to this wave of the Barbie craze myself, even as the sermon was starting to ideate itself, and a longtime fan of America Ferrera's, we're talking before ugly Betty into Real Women Have Curves, I almost bought the Gloria doll for myself. They made a doll of the mom. She's got an adorable pink suit. Instead, though, I scoured eBay and bought the shoes for one of my other Barbies. I think I have enough. Hoping they would fit the Barbie I have, because Gloria, as close as she can get in the Barbie universe, is a character who only represents part of me, even as our definition of womanhood expands. In interviews, Gerwig challenges audiences to hold both the inherent contradictions of Barbie, career woman with endless possibilities, as per her creator, Ruth Handler, sex symbol based off of a German Barbie, well, excuse me, let's protect the license, a German doll that was its predecessor, and Handler used to base this Barbie off of it. So her daughters, according to Handler, whose papers are actually, some of which are in the Schlesinger Library, so her daughter could play, her daughter Barbara could play with something other than paper dolls and imagine different worlds and futures for herself. So when I hear that Gerwig is asking us to hold both, as some of the interviews, some of the early interviews talked about, I started thinking, and after seeing the film, while I was seeing the film, it was to me that Gerwig is doing systems work, really hard systems work. And it made me think of an Audre Lorde quote, hopefully the whole quote here. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. Racism and homophobia are real conditions of all of our lives in this place and time. I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself and touch that terror and loathing of any difference that lives there. See whose face it wears. Then the personal and the political can begin to illuminate all our choices. Gerwig does not let us forget history. Barbie, at one point, meets Ruth Handler. And later, Ruth Handler tells us that she was indicted for, I believe, tax evasion. Barbie was developed in 1959. While Barbie had a friend named Christy, I recently learned from a congregant here that there wasn't a black Barbie until close to 30 years later. Just as Barbie didn't let her peers erase the truth of their histories in the film, Gerwig has not allowed white audiences to forget theirs, as uncomfortable as it may be. A couple months back, while planning this sermon, a friend asked me, Cassie, is there a priest Barbie? There is. Check it out on Instagram. Look up Barbie the Priest. The photos are fabulous. Barbie the priest fawns over Captain Kirk, has tea with a friend, pores over theology and fantasy books in stellar black heels, and holds mass. Her maker, or I guess publicist, is a Swedish priest from the Church of Sweden. So that makes me think, well, and queer Barbie? I suppose I began queering Barbie from a young age, though I wouldn't have had that language per se. I definitely didn't. I would play with her many hers. My mom would sew clothing for her Barbie, which I inherited at way too young of an age. My fine motor skills were not there, so all I have left is this very sturdy dress of my poor mother's collection. But I had a lot of different Barbies, and in her many mostly white iterations. I think Polynesian Barbie that my aunt and uncle got for me on their honeymoon to Hawaii, it has its own complications, people, but was the darkest skinned Barbie that I had for a long time. And I remember her from a very young age, feeling that she was more my Barbie than those blonde Barbies that lined the Barbie house. See, I see Gerwig's film as a subversive text. I know, I already used the word systems work, the jig is up. A feminist text, and a Unitarian one at that. It's one that challenged me to bring my whole self into it, to remember the forms of play that I engaged with, and that would frustrate my sister and friends. And not only representationally, the parts of me, but it lifted the parts of me that I have more trouble looking at, and sometimes even cringe when I see on screen or around me. Maybe not the queer part of myself at this point, but Fat Barbie, rebranded officially as Curvy Barbie. Well, we'll talk about her in a moment. She's the lawyer in the film. When I left the movie theater with my friend and our Barbies, because I brought one of my Barbies with me, I call her Thick Dyke Barbie. She's there. She's in a skirt today and pretty snazzy gold boots and these gorgeous, yellow earrings. All I could think of was how much I wish that, I guess selfishly, that this movie had been made 10, 15, 20 years ago, so that I could have benefited from it then. Gerwig and I are pretty close in age. Why couldn't she have made it when we were 20 or something? Yet perhaps I am not entirely sure I would have been as ready to receive it. But politically, this movie couldn't, I think, have been made then. Economically, Gerwig was given the funding and the platform for a certain rebrand that the Mattel Corporation has been looking for a long time. And despite doubtless compromises that were likely made, the structural integrity of the film is there, in play, in curiosity, in love, of community, of relationships, of self. Now I know that so much of the feminist theory that Gerwig and her team rely upon isn't new. Yet for those of us who have not been or never will be lining the hallways or journals of academia, this form of entertainment crosses into vital art, into world building, spilling its bright light all over us, should we choose to look up and look within. In her text, All About Love, which is our common read at Harvard Divinity School this year, queer Black educator, essayist, theorist, and Buddhist practitioner Bell Hooks writes, "In an ideal world, we would all learn in childhood to love ourselves. We would grow, being secure in our worth and value, spreading love wherever we went, letting our light shine. If we did not learn self-love in our youth, there is still hope. The light of love is always in us, no matter how cold the flame. It is always present, waiting for the spark to ignite, waiting for the heart to awaken and call us back to the first memory of being the life force inside a dark place, waiting to be born, waiting to see the light." There are times in life where we're terrified of taking the next step, no? Maybe you're in one of those moments now. Maybe you just got over one. I'm like, I can't deal with another one right now. Please hold off, universe. When the fear of learning to walk a different way keeps us from moving forward at all. Maybe it might be a physical ailment, that tasks us with reorienting ourselves to the world around us. Maybe it's a mental hurdle that has us questioning the world within us. Maybe it's all those, or none at all. Maybe we don't quite have the language for it yet. Unitarian Universalism, at its best, gives us the space to not only open challenge the systems and cultural mores or norms, and gives us the blank space, the fill in the blank, the space to imagine new ones, create new frameworks, imaginaries that allow us to honor traditions that serve us and not be tied to them when they don't. With this comes the responsibility to one another to listen to new and even old ideas with our whole bodies. And sometimes it doesn't feel safe to listen to the whole body. So what do we do? Where do we turn for comfort, for knowing, for tapping back into ourselves? And that's a challenge for many of us, especially those of us who have been told our bodies are not worthy of being listened to. A friend of mine, when talking about one of those thought partners I mentioned, when talking about the sermon together, said that community can underscore the limits of language and possibility of symbol, and it can also expand it. So community can limit, and it can also expand. Barbie is always going to go beyond the boundaries set for her. Her identity is always going to elude us, a truth about ourselves and others. I would say a truth that's in flux. There is a very clear question that I've been wrestling with as I've been thinking about this sermon, and I've been thinking about even just putting on the service. There's this question of representation versus the prescription as self, and what it means to respect and understand and honor another's play, though it may be different than what we expected. Earlier today, we got to experience communal, what I would call, and maybe this is not within your theology, personal theology, right? Communal spiritual play with that rainstorm, with the singing. I find that Unitarian Universalism is a large enough container for sometimes uncomfortable truth-telling, for courageous imaginings, for spiritual play. This is what I mean by our spiritual imaginaries in the title, Barbie and our spiritual imaginaries. Our abilities to explore, imagine, and share, even in its messiest form, even in its anger, its awkwardness, and dare I say, queerness. Has Weird Barbie taught us nothing? Whether you saw the movie or you had one in your own life, battered and bruised by play in the real world, Weird Barbie, played by a deft gay comedian, Kate McKinnon, at first lives isolated, relegated to the outskirts of Barbie land. An oracle healer, I would argue, that sends stereotypical Barbie into the world that made her find these answers. And there she meets Gloria, who I mentioned earlier. McKinnon, who went to college with Gerwig, says the movie is about how gender roles deny people half their humanity, and we need to just be ourselves. Now, I know that the way I played with Barbie wasn't the way most kids did. I would go item by item, accessory by accessory, getting lost in my internal world of imaginative narration, while my poor sister, 8 years younger, hoped that I would stop dressing them, stop posing them in these little vignettes, and get on to the play with her. I guess today, this play takes different forms, but not letting go of the play of my childhood and what those stories inside my head did. Now I'm learning different ways to communicate them instead of just holding them inside. Today, I did something I never thought I'd do: out myself as a grown fashion doll collector, an ardent and critical fan of Barbie. If you want to hear more criticisms, I'm happy to talk afterwards. Who would take me seriously? Engaging in this consumeristic play. I guess my pushback against that is a lot of the outfits you see there are solely from small vendors that I found on Etsy or eBay who live all over the world and share a love of Barbie and sewing. I guess that's what Thick Dyke Barbie is to me, a one of a kind. Her head with shaved sides and a bright pink top knot, her body a 12-point articulated made to move curvy Barbie, placed together. She reminds me of the joy and safety of the community of queers at the Boston Dyke March I went to this summer, of the queer feminist bookstore All She Wrote that advertised it, of the bright pink and black of the 3XL shirt I bought, figuratively marching with me and my dog Foxy and friends through the streets surrounding Boston Commons, literally on my lap during a Barbie movie. She was there too. It's like a grown child. And alongside me as I wrote and now deliver this sermon, a small icon of representational joy that can be fashioned and refashioned, a symbol of an idea that will likely change with time. I will end with these words. No, you didn't know I was going there, to be fair to me. I was like, do I bring up lawyer Barbie? Yes, I do. In concluding oral arguments in front of the all-female Supreme Court of Barbie Land, lawyer Barbie asserts, "This makes me emotional, and I'm expressing it. I have no difficulty holding both logic and feeling at the same time. And it does not diminish my powers, it expands them." May your powers be expanded today in community.